What a time to be either a kid or somebody who's looking after a kid, given all the anxieties that children out there have had, the pandemic, news about the mass shootings. These are difficult times. But thankfully, there are some opportunities for all of us who are concerned about both explaining mental health issues to our kids and also helping them with their own. And here to talk about that is Ross Szabo. He is the wellness director of the Geffen Academy in Los Angeles. He's a mental health advocate, an author, CEO of the Human Power Project. Ross, thanks for joining us. First of all, what goes through your mind as an expert in this field when you hear the news that bombards us, for example, about the mass shootings?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think the first thing that goes through my mind is just, when can this slow down and what can we do about it? I think that we've all gotten to a place of not again, or thinking about these things in a way that's like, how does this keep happening? And so a lot of times behind these headlines, there are people doing a lot of really great work and powerful work. The youth mental health crisis is pretty massive. But one thing that I see as I travel around the country and even in my own school is there are a lot of young people, there are a lot of educators devoted to trying to make change. And so while all of these headlines are so kind of overwhelming and seemingly nonstop, I try to balance it with what I actually see happening on the ground and the hopes that so many people do have behind these headlines.
And there's certainly a hope that more 18, 19-year-old white men who have been responsible for some of the latest mass shootings can sort of be caught instead of falling through the cracks and buying an AR-15 and doing this. Are there some new programs or new approaches that you've seen over the past couple of years that is proving to be more effective in trying to help specifically, teenage adolescents who are dealing with depression, who are dealing with anxiety and perhaps even violent tendencies?
Yeah, so the mental health crisis is a giant puzzle. And there are many pieces to that puzzle. Having access to mental health care is the most critical piece, and we don't have enough of that happening in our country. The piece that I focus on is teaching about mental health the same way that students learn about physical health. So I think that one of the best things we can do is be teaching about actual mental health definition, vocabulary, coping skills, and normalizing mental health in schools. And so that's something that I see happening around the country, and it's something I work on every day.
In other words, taking away the shame or humiliation and trying to say to kids, look, you get a cold maybe every couple of months. It's not unusual for you to get depressed, severely depressed, just as you might get severely sick. And oh, by the way, there are treatments for all of this.
Yeah, and so a lot of times you hear this kind of buzzword in our country, well, we need to teach mental health the same way we teach physical health. And it's true, but there are actual concrete ways to do that. One way is to teach that mental health isn't having a problem. A lot of times in our society, we look at mental health as a spectrum as you either have a severe mental health disorder or you're sane, and a lot of people fall in between the middle. Well, I have bipolar disorder, which is a severe mental health disorder. I'm also sane at the same time. So we need to change the way we frame mental health and teach it not from a place of you should only seek help when you have a problem, but you should take care of your mental health every single day. You should have a vocabulary for that. You should have coping skills for that. And you don't need to wait till something big happens to actually find ways to strengthen yourself, to learn ways to be vulnerable, to learn ways to express yourself, and to learn ways to balance your mental health. And that's a really significant change. We need to start actually teaching mental health literacy in a way that normalizes this concept for people and allows them to do what you said, understand that there's a difference between feeling depressed or having depression, or feeling nervous and having anxiety, and just make that a part of their everyday language.
I'm so glad that you mentioned your own experience with bipolar issues, and you attempted suicide when you were a teenager. Tell me about that phase in your life and how you essentially got through it.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 16. I went through a lot of trauma between the ages of 11 and 12. And the unfortunate thing about that trauma I went through between 11 and 12 was the coping mechanisms I learned were to shut down and to drink alcohol. So by the time I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, my coping mechanisms were already in place. I was already hiding my emotions. I was already shutting down, and I was already drinking alcohol. So by the time I developed depression during my senior year of high school, I didn't know how to talk about it. I started with a really strong feeling of loneliness, thought the loneliness would go away. It didn't. It built the thoughts of death and suicide every day. I thought those would go away. They didn't. And then in January of my senior year of high school, I attempted to take my own life. I think one of the hardest things and one of the biggest things we miss about depression, especially in young males, is that I really hated myself. And I hated myself more than I think anyone could imagine. And when a person hates themselves, there are no consequences. I wasn't afraid to drive drunk. I wasn't afraid to do drugs. I wasn't afraid to have unprotected sex. I wasn't afraid to take huge risks because I didn't care if I died. So the journey for a lot of young men out of depression and out of self-hatred is a long one. And unfortunately, there's no linear path for that.
I like to explain to people in terms of my own sort of bouts with family issues with depression, that for people who don't quite understand, it's almost like a cloud falls in on you, and everything you remember about the past is shaped by that cloud and looks dark. Everything you think about the future looks bleak, and there is no sort of future. And it may not necessarily seem rational to think, oh my God, my life has just been a total waste until now. But you get into, for people who are depressed, you get into that sort of space where that's how you think. And there are ways to deal with that.
There are a lot of ways to deal with it. I think one of the more frustrating things is when I attempted to take my own life, I didn't actually want to die. I just didn't know how to live anymore. I didn't know how to live with the cloud that you talk about, the constant thoughts of death and suicide and everything overwhelming me. And taking my own life seemed like a way out of that. There are many, many steps between that. There are many steps that people can take. One is finding a way to express yourself. If it's not verbally, just finding coping mechanisms like exercise, music, hanging out with friends, doing something that allows you to express your emotions in a way that may not just be verbal. Obviously, talking about it is really helpful. Other things people can do is, go to a therapist, get a treatment, find ways to really learn about themselves. But I think we live in a society that wants quick fixes. And so when we're in a constant or deep state of depression, a lot of times we think like, okay, well, I want to get out of this and it needs to change tomorrow. And when it doesn't change tomorrow, people with depression like myself felt even more defeated. And, a lot of times people talk about coping mechanisms as being like a change of habit, but it's not a habit formation. You're literally rewiring your brain, and it takes, weeks or months to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the understanding that this is a process, not a quick fix, is so crucial. When we look at the last couple of years, and as a parent and other parents and kids, I mean, it's been an unusual couple of years, right? I mean, for almost 2 years that a lot of schools were sort of shut down. Kids were having to socialize through Zoom and then wear masks when they were in school. Are there particular challenges that you see now, or is it, or do we try to address the anxieties that kids have as a result of the past couple of years in the same way that we would treat them normally?
I think we have to change some things. We spend so much time in schools and as an educator in a school focusing on the skills that we think will prepare kids for the future. So we teach them math and science and English and history and all those things. But what we're seeing for young people as adults, especially when they get to college, is they don't have the life skills they need to just resolve a conflict with a roommate, or to ask someone out on a date, or to do these things. So at my school, Geffen Academy at UCLA, what we do is we teach them once a week, every week from grade 6 through grade 12, these different life skills about their mental health that they can use wherever they go after school, after high school. Because some people take a gap year, some people go to college. It's not all a linear path. And I think that there are more schools interested in doing this. There are more schools aware of this. We host a mental health teacher training institute at UCLA every summer to teach other schools how to do this. But we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And if we are not taking the time to teach young people about these skills and about what they are going through, then we're missing an opportunity, because that second largest period of brain growth is ages 12 to 25. And that's where we often create systems for the rest of our life. I joke with people that being an adult is just trying to undo adolescence, but in some way it is. So we really need to start doing something different.
And one of the things that has shocked me in my life is that you expect, for example, an Ivy League university to have some of the world-class facilities and help for students who are suffering from mental health issues, depressed, whatever it is. But there's been an assumption at some universities, oh, we have the best and the brightest, they don't need much help. Even though they do. What's the way, whether it's an Ivy League university or a public university or even a high school, people who are interested in your curriculum, what do they do to get in touch with you, to start incorporating what you've been teaching and practicing into their own efforts?
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats. I have a company called Human Power Project that creates mental health curriculum for people ages 11 all the way up to corporate. And then my school, Geffen Academy at UCLA, has a program where we, again, teach students about their mental health once a week, but it includes lessons on healthy relationships, healthy sexuality, drug and alcohol prevention, identity development, all those things. Again, it's Geffen Academy at UCLA. And each summer, we have a mental health teacher training institute. You can find all that information on our website just by Googling Geffen Academy at UCLA.
And for educators and teachers out there, is it a very onerous program? If they want, is there a way that if they wanted to just incorporate it once every couple of weeks or have lesson plans here and there? I mean, how immersive does it have to be?
The most important thing we wanted to do was create lessons that could be taught anywhere, charter schools, public schools, anywhere. We take a public health approach to mental health and not a therapeutic approach. So we teach skills and allow students space to figure out how to use those skills, but we don't do the therapy piece because that would require so much immense training that, it wouldn't be replicable. So all of these lessons are very easy to pick up, plug and play, put into a classroom, and really start having that important conversation about mental health.
Yeah, and to say it's important is an understatement. Ross Szabo is an author. His book is Kids' Book About Anxiety. He's also the wellness director at the Geffen Academy at UCLA, mental health advocate, CEO of the Human Power Project. Ross, thanks so much, not only for being on the program, but just for the incredible work that you're doing and the efforts that you're making. It is truly making a big difference and giving a lot of us so much hope. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I love this show, and keep doing the work you're doing because people really need to hear it.